I'm Cynthia James, and this network is about changing lives one woman at a time.
Hello and welcome to Women Awakening. I'm your host, Cynthia James, and I'm so excited that every week I get to introduce you to another incredible woman. I really believe this is a time for women emerging on the planet to bring our gifts, our light, our power, and to support each other in thriving. So I'm grateful that I get to introduce you to people that inspire me, that are change makers, and I believe they're way showers. They're not exceptions. They're examples of what we can do to grow, heal, transform, and make a difference on this planet. Like I said, I do this every week. We're on all the platforms, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, Amazon Video, on YouTube. Look for Women Awakening with Cynthia James. Also, you can go to my website, cynthiajames.net. There's lots of resources there. You can join my online community or sign up for my newsletter. My guest today is someone new to me. Brigitte Cutshall is a health advocate and a speaker who's passionate about encouraging others to lead their happiest, healthiest lives. After dealing with breast cancer twice and a rare primary brain tumor, her goal is to empower others not just to survive, but to thrive. Brigitte is the founder of Gemini Media, a creative enforcer, Real Things Living podcast host, and has authored several books. She brings 30 plus years of experience in the publishing and communications industry to help others share their stories and messages of hope. Brigitte enjoys staying active with her family, her dogs, and of course, running. Brigitte, welcome so much. So glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I would like to start with how you grew up, just so that our audience gets to understand that most of us don't drop on the planet,
No.
with our purpose fulfilled.
That's true. I am a Army brat, military brat. So I grew up around the military. I didn't appreciate it at the time because you have lots of changes. You know what I'm saying? You have to get used to that when you're in that environment, especially as a child. And actually, that has been a benefit as you become an adult. And I had an older brother, and he had to babysit me. I'm a Gen Xer, right? So we were free roamers and whatever back then. And, when the light comes on the street, come home. That's kind of how it was. And I also grew up with mom in the background. My mother's not an American, and she was born in Europe, or excuse me, Vietnam, and my grandfather's French. So long story short, she is half French and half Vietnamese, and she came here after she met an American soldier, and she was a great role model for me because she had a lot of obstacles, because she couldn't speak English in the beginning. And back then, after Vietnam, people were really mean to her because like, it's not her fault. And but I like that aspect because now I definitely was more empathetic to other people who were different. So I learned from that. And I did get in, thankfully, to my brother making me tougher. I did not take getting harassed by other people based on who my mother was.
Right.
And I always stood up, but I said it nicely. Right. I would, right. I think I'm the middle child, and that's part of it. The middle, some people say middle children are wild. I was not. I kept calm and just tried to make everybody consider me a little bit better because I had an older brother and a younger sister. So for some reason, I was, calmer in each situations, but then I reflected on that. I learned, I'm guilty of, responding improperly sometimes. Right. We're all guilty of that. But I really appreciate that background of all these changes and being around different people and being empathetic and understanding that we all are different and it's okay. And that's why I hate labels too. I'm sure that, hey,
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of being labeled. And
Yeah.
people asked me that when I was growing up, and they would say, "What are you?" And I would say, "I am a human." That's what I would respond because my mother, didn't speak. I mean, she has an accent,
Hmm.
but she was really smart, right? I think, and thank goodness for my stepfather. He told me that I could be anything I wanted. Doesn't matter that I'm a girl. And he got my mom to convince, I should say convinced her, but motivated her to get her master's and her PhD. So my mom,
Wow.
right. So she was a good role. I mean, but she was still, people are just in general, I think, I don't know why people are who are mean. They just, I think they have some kind of insecurity, maybe.
Yeah, but you know what I think? I think part of what we're experiencing in the world with all this division
Hmm.
is because we don't honor the unique abilities
Yes.
and the uniqueness of other people, and we don't look at it as a gift. One of the reasons I love to travel is because I get to meet different people, different cultures, and um, learn that there's a lot of similarities and there's difference, and we can learn from each other. So I don't like labels either. So I love that you did that. Did you go to school for? Did you go to college?
I did. That's a funny story too, but I ended up grew up, even though I lived around multiple, or excuse me, different military bases, I ended up starting in North Carolina, which is Campbell University, a private school. Then I met my boyfriend, my future husband, who was in the military. And long story short, I was tired of moving around, being a military brat. I moved to Wisconsin to transfer to University of Wisconsin. My mom wasn't happy because this is the thing, I was in it's the 80s, early 80s, but I was always, I just stood up for myself. I said, I'll be fine. I'll make it happen. I'll make it work. And I found it, right? Because I joke that I'm a little stubborn, but I'm also kind. And I always stood up for myself. And so I ended up finding a job with a company that was a book printer that printed stuff for these big traditional publishers. And that's kind of how I got in the business. But back then, these companies would help pay for your school. But
Ah,
I had to have a certain GPA and I only worked 30 hours. So I shouldn't say only, but they knew I had potential because I'm not bossy. Some people might think I'm bossy, but I'm but I just they liked it, and I was the only female in that industry. It was really hard if you weren't a secretary, right? But
right.
I learned again from my mother as a role model, and then my future mother-in-law. She was a great role model too. So I appreciate all that, and I think again it goes. Now they made fun of me too when I moved to Wisconsin because they said I had a Southern accent, and I'm like and I but I didn't realize I did. It wasn't that strong because I grew up mostly in the
Right.
East. But then I learned because of being around my mother, I could change my accent when I'm around people to fit. You know what I'm saying? I could
Yeah.
tweak it a little bit and not sound whatever. But
Right.
I've always believed in being you, and so that was a good experience. And I graduated. Now my last 2 years of college was paid for by this company.
I well, I love that. I want to talk about your health challenges because it led you to do what you do today, but breast cancer twice and a brain tumor? In what period of time?
It was my entire 40s. But my kids, I have two sons. The whole thing started because, again, some people don't believe in intuition and listen to your body. I did. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't listening to my body. And it started with my OBGYN recommended an MRI as a baseline when I was 39, and which was standard, but she had breast cancer. So that's why she asked a patient, and apparently when you have breasts that are dense, like mine were dense, you're more likely to get it. I didn't know this kind of stuff. So you have to respect doctors. So I did the MRI, not, I'm sorry, mammogram, I'm saying it wrong.
Uh,
And then 2 years later, and when I was 41, that's when they discovered a little lump. And I didn't know I had it. And that's why a lot of women are afraid to go get checkups, but I'm a believer. It's about finding it early, being preventative. And then we had to have, not we, Bridget had to have 2 surgeries to get clear margins and all that kind of stuff. And then they were testing my hormones too. My hormones were wacky, meaning they were like really high prolactin levels, which is breast milk, and growth hormones. And like this is when growth hormones are connected to cancer. Genetic testing showed I did not have a genetic, it wasn't in my DNA. This
Right.
was very accurate. But then I had a really great breast cancer oncologist who is also a researcher. And he's the one, 3 years after the first breast cancer, he's like, let's do an MRI to check out your pituitary, which is what controls my hormones. And they found a tiny tumor on my pituitary and found a big old tumor in the back of my head, which I didn't know I had. And that grew slowly. And
Wow.
that's why my body accommodated it. It grew slowly. But it was, we didn't know what to do because it was rare and where it's located. And so I saw 6 different specialists. And it turned out the type of tumor I have is called a vestibular schwannoma, which grows on your balance nerve.
Uh-huh.
They said that's usually that area is caused by radiation exposure. And it goes back to probably being a military brat. I was around military bases as a child. So I was exposed to radiation at some point. That's like my mother is fine. She was never had any issues. My brother had something too the same year, my brain tumor. Isn't that just weird?
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
and it was kind of in a way a blessing to have found that breast cancer because that's how we found the brain tumor. We're able to treat it. But then again, I couldn't get my hormones and I should say they still were wacky. And so I had to have my breast cancer came back because we couldn't control those hormones. I was on medicine and it made me too hyper, Cynthia. They knew I'm
Mhm.
like, and also one doctor just wanted to give me, I had weird pain sometimes. He wanted to give me pain pills. I said, no, I wanted to know what was going
What
on.
was happening, not just cover up the pain.
No, right. And so breast cancer came back again, aggressive. And it was in my breast tail, which is by your armpit. I didn't know that was such a thing. So again, being curious and listening and asking questions really helped me solve everybody involved. They were like calling me the zebra. So they ended up I had because it came back at 49, this breast cancer came back 8 years later. And it has a lot to do with my hormones being wacky. And I always did the right things. So it ended up, because it was considered aggressive, I laugh about it now, double mastectomy on my 49th birthday. But I'm like, I don't want to deal with this again. And
Right.
it was too close to my lymph nodes, that kind of scary
Right.
stuff. And my sons knew, again, I've always been a runner. Then 2 weeks before that surgery, my sons were 16 and 19 at the time. They ran a race with me because we didn't know when I could run again. So that was like just that kind of beautiful stuff like that. And then,
Wow.
right, so it turned out, as I keep asking questions, and the neurosurgeon that was following the brain tumor, I asked him, that's one of the reasons, what can we do about this? And he says, well, I said, would you do surgery if this was your wife? Because this was all going on at the same time. And
Right.
I
Exactly.
wouldn't do surgery if it was my wife because of paralysis I could have from the surgery. So I'm like, okay, great. And I just prayed a lot and I, ate really well. And it was my OBGYN who discovered the breast cancer to begin with. She recommended a tetanus booster shot a year after that last breast cancer because I have to get MRIs of the time of my brain. And the tetanus booster shot is what killed that brain tumor. It's totally dead now.
Wow.
They're repurposing that tetanus shot for brain tumors. And it's about being curious and listening to your body and only working with doctors who will let you ask questions.
Yeah, 100%. Well, this is such an extraordinary story. And I listening to the body
Yeah.
is so essential But I wanna ask you now. I mean, that was a 10-year stretch, really.
Yes.
So, how did you take that experience and move it into the work that you do today? What was the thing that jump started it?
I think that last breast cancer, when it was very aggressive, and I had to have surgery and chemo and all that stuff, and I was bald, but I knew I had to do this. Again, my instincts that you've got to do this. And so many people were inspired by me with my positive attitude. Bridget really came out. I've always been positive, and I wanted to help people. And I wrote my first book, even though isn't that weird? I'm in the publishing world. I didn't wait until after cancer, but I did. And I made it different. I made it not just words, but some visuals and pictures, because that's popular now too, right? Visual communications, and people
Yes.
like that. And I was being, again, Bridget, and they found it different and unique. And that's kind of how I got into it. I started doing more speaking. And I didn't mention, I had a corporate job right before the breast cancer, the second one. I got laid off,
Oh,
and with a bunch of other people, not just me. And so I was looking for, and the cancer came back. It's like, geez, I gotta just like, how could I help the world? And I had some clients convince me to do my own business, right? And I was started Gemini Media going through cancer treatment. That's why I joke about being bald, but I was just being me, and I embraced it. And that's what it was. People had so much positivity getting that from me. Does that make sense?
yeah.
And
But so
like
so let me ask a question though. What does Gemini Media do?
Gemini Media, I cannot help with storytelling or it's production aspect of what projects they want help with, and with their stories.
Right.
Because so many people, they want to do this, but they're so afraid. And I'm like, listen, you don't just wait to get cancer like I've had a couple times to do this, right? That's kind of what it is. And people, I took my knowledge for granted, the value that I had. So I do a lot of the content I create is around health and wellness, but then I have clients come to me for me to help them with their projects. And it's just something I took for granted. And I
Right.
didn't realize all the great connections I had. You just take yourself for granted.
Right.
And that's why dealing with something like a cancer, you pause and like, what's important? What are you going to do? Move forward. And I want to help people to be focusing on kindness and being and positive, and that helps them get through the day. And
Right.
to me, it's not just about how many followers you got on that's just me, on your social media. You want to help people any way you can. And I've gotten, like I said, people are just very inspired by the curiosity that I share and being kind.
Yeah, so this is great. So let's say that I'm a woman who, has had a big story like yours. I mean, yours is a big story. And I came to you. What would you talk to me about to make sure that I was the perfect client for you?
Well, I'd want to know what's your end goal for this, right? And if I could help you, and what is the method that you're comfortable with for sharing a story. Does that make sense? Some
Yes.
people aren't comfortable with writing a book and publishing a book. Some people aren't comfortable with speaking on stages, and I've done it all. So I'm kind of multifaceted. So it just depends on that. To me, I would recommend putting your thoughts down at a minimum, like a article or a blog post. And to me, a book is so popular now because of what's happening in the industry, the tech. It makes it easier for people to do this.
Yes.
And cost was a big factor in the past, meaning you had to do like 1,000 copies. Now you can do one, right?
Yeah.
So it's about what is the impact what's your goal? What impact do you want to make for others?
Yeah, well, I just think that that's beautiful. And your podcast, Real Things Living podcast, uh, what does that focus on?
It focuses on resilience. And
Aha.
I started it based on my first book called Real Things, 6 Ways to Embrace Life. And that's the book I had with all the visuals in there and the stories. and people like it. And I'm getting a lot of people are coming to me because of the stories that I'm sharing. Originally, I just had cancer patients. Okay. But then they're like, everybody's dealing with something. Let's have lots of other stories. One guy I had on that's really been popular. He talked about being a male caregiver after his wife died, and he wrote this book. I mean, it was I mean, men. He is like men need to speak up too, right?
Yes.
They hide their emotions, but it's just stuff like that, and people are like, wow, they're really into hearing those kind of stories. And then you can, what's good about a podcast, you can repurpose it and make clips.
Yes.
And people, majority of them, not all of them, but majority of the guests I do have, if I have a guest, they are authors, because authors come to me because I'm in that world and they want to share it and amplify. And it's a good way to market their book. And
Yes.
they're very open about what they've dealt with and how they overcome it. And it's positive takeaways, Cynthia. That's kind
Yes.
of about resilience and how to connect with others and how you got to get through it.
I just think that is so, so beautiful. How many books have you written?
5.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's something that's just been in my mind, and I think COVID is when I did 3 of them. I mean, the past 4 years. It's just because I had time on my hands and getting feedback from other people. My most popular one, I give away actually. It's called the Real Things Living Coloring Journal. Add more color to your life. I saw how stressed people were. People talk about journaling and people talk about coloring. Well, I thought I would put it together, and then the prompt is whatever you're coloring on that page. And the next page, next to it, what are your thoughts are. Not it's just helps come up with ideas, and people liked it and they thought it was meditative.
Yes.
And that's something that was coming out of Brigitte, right? And someone said to me, I'm one of those people, I like to use lots of crayons. I'm like, yeah, you're right, in life, because we're still here.
Well, that's incredible. Tell me, how do people find you and your work?
The best place is go to my website, BrigitteCutshall.com. Make sure you spell it Brigitte, Cutshall, Cutshall.com. You can find me on Instagram with the same name and on LinkedIn for the same
Okay.
name. Instagram is more for fun pictures, but yeah, it's kind of that's what I do. But LinkedIn is really cool. I like that environment too.
That's beautiful. So, this show, I ask the same last question of every person on my show. This show is called Women Awakening. What do you think is the most important thing about women awakening on the planet in this moment?
I think we a little bit more resilient. We are, because we have to take the burden of, just if we have children, birthing them. And I mean, men are important too, but we have to stand up and be resilient and be a good role model. That's kind of what it is. And I so grateful I had good 2 role models, my mother and my mother-in-law. And I think for just innately, we are more intuitive, which helps us. Some people think it's woozy, but is that the right word? But I don't think it is. I think it's embrace who you are. And some people can need help. And one thing that women trying to do, though, is we try to do too much by ourselves. So don't be afraid for ask for help. That's, again, you learn that from resilience. After being knocked down, you'll find a way how to get back up. Someone's going to help you lift you up.
Well, that is so beautiful. Well, Bridget, I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that you're doing this work on the planet. And thank you so much for being a guest.
I really appreciate it, Cynthia. And I love what you're doing too to help women, empower women.
Thank you. Okay, ladies, I close this show the same way with different words. One of the things I loved about what Bridget said was, you know, don't let anybody label you. Don't let anybody put you in a box. You came here as an original imprint, an authentic expression of the universe. And the gifts and the things that can come through you are powerful. No matter what obstacles you have to come through, you do you do hold a space of resilience and you came here to thrive. Thank you so much for being here. I love you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next show. Many blessings.